Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the A to Z CFB podcast, where we go over all things college football. This week, like I said in my last video, if you haven't watched that yet, you should. We went over who I think will win each conference. We're going to be going over my top five Heisman candidates coming into this season, and which teams that I truly believe have a chance of making the college football playoff. Disclaimer: I do not mean who I think can win the college football playoffs, just the teams that I think could actually make the college football playoff. Before we begin, I just want to thank you guys for checking this out, checking out our channel, and remind you that if you do like this kind of stuff, to go check out the TikTok page, A to Z CFB. Go find me on Twitter, and maybe subscribe, hit that like button. Anyway, without any more shilling, let's get into this. So my top five Heisman candidates, I'm going to go from honorable mentions down to one. So my first couple names that I'm going to name are just players that I think aren't in my top five, but I think, definitely are worthy of being mentioned here in this spot. Those guys are, uh, again, in no particular order. Nick Singleton, a running back from Penn State, Arch Manning, the quarterback from Texas, Luke Altmaier, a quarterback from Illinois, John Mateer, a quarterback from Oklahoma, Drew Aller, a quarterback from Penn State, Ryan Williams, a wide receiver from Alabama, and Taylon Green, a quarterback from Arkansas. All of these guys, again, I really think that they are definitely talented enough to win or at least be considered for the Heisman. I just think in this year's class, they're not going to do it. Number five, the player I think is fifth on my list for Heisman voting right now. That's going to be Devon Dampier, the quarterback from Utah. Dampier transferred to Kyle Whittingham's offense in this past season from New Mexico, and despite maybe being a little lesser known, the Arizona native he can flat out play. Go watch the game against Arizona last year against the Wildcats. He has pretty much been on my radar since then, where he accounted for nearly 400 yards and five touchdowns against what was at the time a top 25 ranked program, and he did this with the with a New Mexico team that has been really less than stellar this entire time. He now will get to play under a very experienced head coach who has won his conference multiple times and as arguably the number one offensive line in the country. I've said this before. I think Utah coming into this season has the number one offensive line in my opinion. He was playing against behind essentially an offensive NFL offensive line, and he is going to he's going to have a lot more um, you know, resources around him. He was playing this well, and he seems like he's somebody who has something to prove, and he's somebody who I really have enjoyed watching play up until this point. I do think, kind of a similar problem as maybe some of these other guys I'll have on this list lower than maybe they should be, is that he won't have the SEC or Big Ten vote, but hey, that didn't really matter for Travis Hunter last year. So who knows? Maybe the Big 12 can produce another Heisman winner. Number four, this is going to be Jeremiah Love, a running back from Notre Dame. And Jeremiah Love is definitely my preseason favorite for the Doak Walker Award. He is going to be a really, really good running back. And for a very, very good Notre Dame team, this is, going to be the best player, most likely, at least on the offense, the flashiest position on what is most likely going to be, spoiler alert, a playoff team. Right. This is a guy that has had one of the best, run after contact numbers last year. He had some of the best yards. The reason why he's not higher on this list is one, we haven't seen a running back win in a little bit. And two, I think that Notre Dame's running back by committee kind of style, I'm interested to see if Coach Marcus Freeman is going to use him in the amount that he actually should in order to be actually considered for the Heisman, in a legitimate case. Is he going to put up, 15, 16, 1700 yards in this offense and be that bell cow every day? That is going to allow him to rise up the Heisman ranks. Not that he can't. And I again want to say that I absolutely believe, he's the guy there. I just don't know if under Marcus Freeman's offense, he is going to get the opportunities necessary. Number three, and the guy who I think a lot of people think is going to be the number one quarterback in the country, and that's Cade Klubnik, a quarterback from Clemson. I do believe that Cade Klubnik is going to be one of the best quarterbacks in college football. He wins if Clemson wins a ton of games and they beat their SEC opponents and South Carolina at the end of the season and LSU in the Battle of Death Valleys earlier in the season, I think that he could absolutely propel himself up to the top. But if he loses even one of those games, I think the Southern vote and a lot of the voters are going to look at that and be like, well, he just beat up on ACC talent all year, so what does it matter? Like, we're kind of the almost the same thing that kept Ashton Genty from winning the Heisman last year. They said his level of competition. Um, and frankly, even if Cade Klubnik wins some of those, I can definitely see kind of the same thing I said with Devon Dampier that I think they might focus a little bit more in on the Big Ten and SEC kind of players, and that will almost always be an excuse not to recognize some of these other players. Number two, a wide receiver from Ohio State. You all know who it is, Jeremiah Smith. I think it's very clear that Jeremiah Smith is the most talented non-quarterback player in college football right now, at least on the offensive side of the ball. I can definitely hear some cases for some defensive players. Um, and frankly, if he wasn't a true freshman last season, he was eligible for the draft. I think he absolutely would have been a top 10 draft pick, at least a first rounder last year. He's got soft and strong hands, body control, ability to run after the catch, phenomenal route running. He's got the length and speed. I mean, it's about anything you could ask for in a wide receiver. And he seems to be, doing it at a high level in the biggest moments. And there seems to be nothing too bright for him. Julian Sayin was going to have a very easy transition, I think, into, or whoever is going to end up starting for Ohio State should have a relatively easy transition coming into the college football landscape with wide receivers like Jeremiah Smith, even if he didn't have, Cornell Tate as well, running with him. Not to mention that I think that Jeremiah Smith is going to be a perennial shoe-in for the Biletnikoff Award over the next 2 seasons, should he stay healthy and should he be, the guy at Ohio State. Number one on my list, that is going to be DJ Lagway, quarterback from Florida. Last year, I got really high on him. I thought, you know what, DJ Lagway, he looks really good. I think he's going to be really good. And I said it, I think, in a podcast last year that I think that DJ Lagway is going to be my pick for the Heisman coming into this season. And he's gotten a little bit more hype, and now he's kind of come back down to earth. But I think that he's the reason why Billy Napier even has a job right now. Billy Napier should have been fired for what he's done to this Florida football program years ago. But the fact that he's brought in DJ Lagway, and the moment that this super talented quarterback came in and played against, teams like Georgia and continued and immediately made them, competitive. I think that in an SEC situation, being one of the most talented players in college football, I think DJ Lagway is my favorite this year to win the Heisman Trophy. And I think if he stays healthy, he might be the most talented quarterback to be playing in college football this season. All right, let me know if I missed anybody down in the comments. You can tell me if there's people you agree with, disagree with. Uh, you know, just tell me whatever you're thinking about it. All right, next, moving on to the second part of what this podcast is going to be. We are going to, like I said, we're going to be going over the teams that I think can make the playoff, not the teams that I think are going to win the whole thing or even can win the whole thing, because we have some G5 teams in here. And I think part of that comes from, what teams impressed this year, what teams win games that they shouldn't win. Some people will say, why do we even care? Why does it matter who can make the playoff if, only maybe 3 to 5 teams can actually win the whole thing? Which I would say maybe more than 3 to 5 teams can win the whole thing. But what I would say to that would be a team has something to play for, right? It's just another clear stepping stone, another clear path to getting to where you need to be. Do you think Arizona State fans last year are upset that they made the playoff, even if they lost? No, they're very happy they made the playoff. Do you think that Boise State fans wish that they won another game? Yeah, I'm sure they wish they beat Penn State. But at the same time, I think that, you know, making another achievable goal for maybe the level right below actual playoff contention is very, very worthy of something to talk about. And I also think that on any given Saturday, any team can win. So, I mean, look, we almost saw Arizona State beat Texas. Um, we saw some team at Notre Dame beat a Georgia team that many people, including myself, didn't think they would be able to beat. It seems to me like I said, any team can win on any given Saturday, and I think that we're going to be looking at maybe more upsets here in the future, even if you have a team like SMU or Tennessee who got absolutely blown out in the first round. All right. My honorable mentions. I do have a few teams that I think are right on the cusp, and these are for a couple reasons. Mainly the reasons being either schedule, strength of schedule, or just I just am not totally sold on if they can do it, but if everything works out perfectly, like maybe they could. Those teams are Georgia Tech, Iowa State, Auburn, UNC, Army, Navy, and Oklahoma. Like I said, the reason why they're in the honorable mentions and not in the actual, you know, list of 25 teams that I have that I think could actually make the playoffs, I don't, I don't necessarily think that these are bad teams and I wouldn't, there is a universe that they make it. I just think that if, it's way more challenging than these other 25 teams. I also did feel like I needed to cut it off at some point. All right, so in this list of 25, I have 18 teams that are Power Four teams. So ACC, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12. The other 19 through 25 are group teams. So obviously, I don't expect more than one of these teams to make it. And frankly, in this list of 25, I'm not even sure this would be my top 25 right now heading into the season just because of the variance in here. But I do think that all of these teams, like I say, have a real shot at making the playoffs. And some of that also comes from other ways, like teams that might have an easier schedule that I think, if they win their conference, might have a clearer path to making it than maybe, like I said, like in Oklahoma, who is a very, very talented team, but might not necessarily have uh, the favor this year of the college football gods to allow them to make it. All right, that being said, let's get into the actual list of these 25 teams. So we're going to start with these group of five teams. The five teams that I think, and again, in no particular order, that I think could make the playoff this year are Tulane, Memphis, Boise State, UNLV, Southern Miss, Toledo, and FAU. Tulane, especially with getting Jake Retzlaff, even if they end up starting their Ball State transfer, I think that they are, perennially one of the more talented group of five teams that pretty much always finds themselves in contention for, for even potentially like moving up into the Power Five landscape and competing with Power Five competition. I think they almost always have to be considered for this list. Memphis, they were the favorites coming into last season. They got Brandon Lewis, the transfer from Nevada. I think that they're really, really itching to make a name for themselves and move into this, maybe move into the ACC when they eventually, in 2031, when they eventually disband, or maybe move into the Big 12. They tried to move into the Big 12 in the last roundabout, right? This is a team itching to be into a Power Five or Power Four program. I guess now almost back to Power Five with the pack being back. I think that they are just going to. I think they have about as good a shot as anyone else on this list. Boise State, they made it last year, although they might not have the same talent at running back that they did last year. I do think that they are going to be, they were my favorite to win the Mountain West. And look, they're leaving the Mountain West after this year, so they might really sell out this season to win it all. By win it all, I mean make the playoffs. UNLV, another Group of Five school, the team that came in second in the Mountain West last season. And I think that UNLV, they definitely have some things to work on, and they have a lot of to replace, like Ricky White. They got to replace him. They have this crazy quarterback competition happening. But I do think that, with the new head coach hire, with everything being different, and maybe with a little bit more NIL coming in, as we might have seen with the Alex Orji, Anthony Calandria uh, additions, that this is a team that could absolutely compete at this level. Southern Miss, I think that this is a team that's just basically going to be that Marshall team from last year. We saw Charles Huff, their head coach. He uh, didn't get extended by Marshall for whatever reason after winning the Sun Belt, and he just went to the worst team, got hired by then, basically took the entire Marshall team with him, and then they got um he took basically, like I said, this whole team, and now I think that they are just going to be a very, very talented team. And I think, you could basically look at this as back-to-back conference championships if they win. And I think that that might be valued and push them up ahead. The MAC is back, and as far as the MAC existing, I know that Northern Illinois is leaving, but I think Toledo could definitely make themselves a case. I think Toledo's going to be a very good team this year. They're my pick to win the MAC. And I just think that they will have the top down talent this year in Tucker Gleason at their quarterback, who I think is going to take that next step up and really open up his legs and extend plays and be able to fire that ball down the field even without Jerjon Newton. And finally, to round out the G5 schools, FAU, a team that I've been particularly high on. I love the marriage of Zach Kitley and Caden Veltkamp, along with his favorite target, Easton Messer, coming along. They're going to have a much better defense than last year. One of the more creative and air raid happy offenses is real run and gun kind of play. Their run game is going to be solid, and I think that they're just going to shock a lot of people. Frankly, week one. Uh, depending on what the line looks like, I'm tempted to take the spread against Maryland for them. I think that they're, like I said, are going to be a very talented team this season, and I'm pretty excited to see what they do. All right, now we have 18 teams, again, in no particular order, that are going to be from the Power Four landscape that I think could really make the playoff. Those teams: Penn State, Clemson, Alabama, Texas, Georgia, Ohio State, Miami, Notre Dame, LSU, Texas A&M, South Carolina, Illinois, Oregon, Arizona State, Texas Tech, Michigan, Utah, and SMU. I tried to get a couple from every conference, even if maybe it was a little more of a stretch. Um, that being said, I don't really think I did too much of that overall stretching. I think each of these teams has a clear path to make the college football playoff, and I think that they absolutely can do it. We're not going to talk about each of these teams individually. That would take a while. As you saw, we just spent about 10 minutes talking about just Tulane through FAU. So we're going to kind of group some of these. So grouping them into a couple of different categories. First, we're just going to talk about the Big 12 teams, right? I think that despite their overarching differences, I think that we can talk about the Big 12 as kind of one big thing, is in they're going to be better than obviously a group of five team. And I think that Arizona State, Texas Tech, and Utah are going to really benefit from the fact that the Big 12 loves to eat themselves up. I don't think we're going to get, some undefeated, maybe one or two lost team that just rolls through the Big 12. I think even with Texas Tech in this incredible transfer class that they have this season, Utah and Arizona State are still going to be very formidable for them. And even teams like TCU and maybe even like a West Virginia and Iowa State and a Kansas State especially are going to be very, the group is they're going to eat themselves alive, and whatever team comes out of that is going to obviously get a playoff spot. And I just think that these three teams are the most likely teams to get it done. Next, SMU. They brought back Kevin Jennings. They still have a great run game, and RJ Maryland should be back to help them out on offense. Not to mention this defense is frankly going to be better than it was last year. And although I think Clemson up at the top here, like I mentioned earlier, is going to be one of the best teams in college football this year. I think that SMU might have to flex their muscles a little bit. And even if it doesn't happen this year, I can absolutely see SMU in the next, I don't know, 5-ish years really flexing that Dallas money that they couldn't flex, 20 years ago, and wake kind of that sleeping giant in the heart of Texas to basically buy them the biggest, baddest football team around. Speaking of the ACC, we got Clemson, Miami, SMU, and I think that is it for the SEC of the ACC. But that being said, Miami, I mean, under Mario Cristobal, they were right there last year. They really just ended up losing a game that they shouldn't have lost, and I think that even with Carson Beck, who I haven't been the highest on, if he can, get his mind out of the gutter, I think this Miami team is going to be very good. I just talked about SMU, and I think this year with Dabo Sweeney is absolutely going to be proving some people wrong, or at least attempting to prove some people wrong this season. A lot of people saying he's washed. A lot of people saying his method doesn't work. Well, he's doubling down. He's not adapting. He's doubling down, and he's proving this year that he can still recruit at a high level. He can still win at a high level. And frankly, he almost won a game last year after a very surprised ACC victory over SMU. I think that Clemson is going to they're going to be one of the top seeds in the playoffs this year, as far as I'm concerned. And they absolutely are one of the few teams that I think can actually win the whole thing. And we're going to really get to see how they stack up week one against LSU. Next, we got our let's go over the SEC next. So Alabama, Texas, Georgia, LSU, Texas A&M, South Carolina. Yes, those are the teams that I think from the SEC can do it. All of these teams might end up having more of a Big 12 problem where they end up eating each other alive. Unfortunately for them, with the SEC propaganda, you can just assume that they're going to, their schedules are assumed to be harder than just about every other schedule purely because they're in the SEC. So a loss to an SEC team means a lot less than a loss to a Big 12 team in this situation. So I think Alabama, I actually just talked about them today on TikTok. So if you follow me on TikTok, I would go check that out as we're going to actually start going through all of the SEC. Look, Texas with Arch Manning, watching Arch talk the other day, he seems committed, and I'm a huge fan of the competition seeming to happen at Texas camp between him, Michael Taffy, everybody who seems to Texas seems super bought in. And if Steve Sarkisian can get his guys ready and willing to go, then I think they're going to be a very, very talented team. Georgia, that's a team that if Gunnar Stockton can do it, he can do it. Is Kirby Smart done, or is he have more things to offer? LSU, maybe I left out Garrett Nussmeier in my Heisman list, but he definitely would not have been in my top five. I do think Garrett Nussmeier is going to be one of the best quarterbacks in football next year. I just don't think he's going to be Heisman worthy, and I think part of that's going to be because of almost the fatigue. I don't think he's going to come anywhere near Joe Burrow or Jaden Daniels, and therefore I don't think he's going to be worthy of being the Heisman at LSU. Kind of a gift and a curse to be a quarterback there. Texas A&M, big fan of what Marcel Reed is doing there. I like Mike Elko, and I think Mike Elko is somebody who I think one of the biggest problems has been people have said Texas A&M hasn't earned it; they've bought it, and I think Mike Elko has absolutely earned himself his time and patience to be a playoff contending team. South Carolina, I like Lenore Sellers. I think he's a very talented quarterback. I do think he has a little bit to work on in his game, and I'm maybe not the highest on him that other people are, but I do think that South Carolina is a very talented team. They got a great young wide receiving core. They got Roswell Fajon, a running back transfer from Utah State, and I think they're going to be, like I said, a very talented team this year, and especially in the SEC, they will always get the benefit of the doubt. Uh, Next, Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame is going to be a very talented team. I already said Jeremiah Love is going to be one of the best running backs in football next year. And I think if CJ Carr pans out the way that he's supposed to, and Riley Leonard has spoken very highly of him, Marcus Freeman has spoken very highly of him. Everyone speaks very highly of CJ Carr. And I think if he is as advertised, then he should absolutely be able to get Notre Dame into the playoff. And I think that their performance last year in the playoffs definitely helps them. This year with getting the benefit of the doubt. Not to mention they bolstered their defense with an aforementioned Devonta Smith safety transfer from Bama. That was one of the biggest transfers in college football. I think he's really going to help them. Finally, the Big Ten. Penn State is going to be a wagon this year. I think that this is the season that it all has to come down to to fruition. I think that Penn State this season is going to be one of the best teams in college football, and if they don't win it this year, it is entirely their fault. They need to start beating teams. They look. He does a great job. Their team does a great job of James Franklin does a great job of beating teams he's supposed to beat. Now he just has to beat teams that he's not supposed to beat, and those are teams like Ohio State. Those are teams like Oregon. Those are teams like even Michigan, frankly, that I think he will need to that this team will need to overcome. But I think once they do it once, they'll figure it out, and they absolutely are my favorites to win the national championship this season. Ohio State, a team that is, they just won it last year. How could they not this year? They have, one of a five-star quarterback in Julian Say and a five-star quarterback, even two behind him in Taven St. Clair. I think that Tavian St. Clair, and that this is just as talented of a team, even with new coaching staff all around, outside of Ryan Day. Illinois, this is a team that I'm getting based off of almost purely based off of experience. This is going to be one of the most experienced teams in college football. This is a team that's kind of similar to Penn State, as they have, these guys have been playing together now for two whole seasons, and now they're going into another one where they're going to be, they actually have expectations, and I think that if they meet those expectations, they will absolutely be a playoff team and maybe even can win a playoff game. Oregon, this is a Dan Lanning poll. I think Dan Lanning is one of the best head coaches in college football. And even with Dante Moore, who's been probably the biggest project he's had to work with before, Bo Nix and Dylan Gabriel, I think he can do it. And they still have a ton of really good receiving talent. They just got Mekhi Hughes, a running back transfer. Their offensive line is going to be one of the best in the country again. And I think defensively, that where they really struggled last year is where they probably focused the most on this offseason. And I think that they're going to come back with a vengeance. I feel like we haven't talked about Oregon that much, and I think we're going to be talking about them early and often this upcoming season. And finally, to round out all of these teams, Michigan. Michigan is a team that we forget because they had a bad season last season, but just had an undefeated season where they won the national championship. Not to mention they've beaten Ohio State for the last 4 straight years, arguably some years where they definitely shouldn't have. Michigan is a very talented team, and I even think that with the Sharon Moore, Sharon Moore suspension might even help them in the long run as far as giving them real motivation to uh, help to help them get to where they need to be to play in the playoffs. I think that, Bryce Underwood, it's hard to bet on a freshman quarterback, but if he plays fine, even not even super well, but if he plays fine, I think that they're going to be a very, very talented team. And I think that they absolutely can and probably will make the playoff. All right. That rounds out my top five Heisman candidates. That also rounds out all the teams that I think could actually make the playoffs. Again, not teams that I think will make the playoffs, but teams that I think can make the playoffs. And and again, not necessarily ones that I think could win it. But let me know in the comments if there's any teams I missed, any players I missed in the Heisman thing. Any teams you think maybe I said that you don't think could make the playoffs, and let me know why. Um, I always ask people say, "Oh, you know, this team can't do this." Tell me why. I'm curious. Why do you think? I'm always willing to learn something. That being said, if you like this kind of content, if you like college football, make sure you go follow me on TikTok, subscribe here, give this video a like, give me your thoughts. I always love interacting with you guys. Um, right now, we just entered the SEC, going over all 136 FBS programs on TikTok. So if you like that, like I said, go give that a follow. I post them daily. Right now I'm doing two a day because I realized I have 40 more teams to go over in 20 days, or I did. Um, so that we're actually cranking those out right now. Later today, we're going to be posting Arkansas. Uh, that being said, thank you for checking this out. It's been a ton of fun talking about college football. It always is. And I will see you guys next time. All right.